サウナ今日。
6人ぐらいいたよ。
ああ。サンドイッチは全部食べたの？
食べた。
あ、全部食べた。
うん。
量多くなかった。
多くない。
お腹空いてる？
うん。
タコ作ってよ。
あ、
風邪いってるかね？
来てない。いや、今来てる。
今日いい運動できた？シャワー浴びたの？
まだ、サウナだって6人いたってさっき言ったじゃない。
ああ。
6人いて、取るとこないんだもん。
どうしたのそれで？
最初はタクシーが。
ああ。シャワー浴びた？
What kind of things have changed your mind in the past?
He went on to say that while we want people to come to Christ, they have to get there on their own. But it's our duty to exemplify Christ in our actions.
When you have these conversations, one of the elements that comes with it is the person that you're conversing with starts watching you very carefully all the time because they want to see how do these beliefs manifest themselves in your behavior.
I'm Reed Ritter. And that is all our time for now. You can find more news at afn.net. You can also find us on X and on Facebook. We appreciate your listening. I'm Robert Thornton. The mission of American Family Association is to inform, equip, and activate individuals to strengthen the moral foundations of American culture and give aid to the church here and abroad in its task of fulfilling the Great Commission. Further, AFA believes this ministry, as well as everything in the heavens and on the earth, belongs to God, and AFA's role is that of a trusted manager.
Thank you for standing with the American Family Association.
Hello, and welcome to the Dr. Nurse Mama Show, prescribing hope for healthy families here on American Family Radio. Here's your host, Professor, Pediatric Nurse Practitioner, and Mama of 4, Dr. Jessica Peck.
Well, hey there, friends, and welcome to my favorite time of day, getting to spend time with you, prescribing hope for healthy families. We need it. We need hope and hope-filled stories. And one of the things that I love most about sitting behind this microphone is being able to invite people to share their hope-filled stories and to share their testimony, because we can find hope in heartache. We live in a broken world. We live in a world where we experience trials and trauma and
知ってる人いた？知ってる人今日いた？
we have hope. We have a hope that does not disappoint, and that God cares for us so deeply. And so my question for you, maybe you've been in this situation and you have known someone in this kind of situation. What do you do when a healthcare provider, when a physician tells you that your unborn child will be a drain on your family? Well, for Beverly Jacobson, this was the moment that heartbreak turned into fierce, unstoppable love and advocacy and hope that she's going to share. So we're going to introduce you today to the mom who took what some think is their worst news, their worst nightmare, but just turned it into a mission of hope. I want you to get ready to meet a true mama bear, and that is Beverly Jacobson. Beverly, welcome. We're so glad to have you here today.
Well, hello, and thank you so much for having me. It's truly an honor to be here.
Well, Beverly, we're going to talk about a topic that's pretty tender for a lot of people. We're going to talk about prenatal diagnosis, about pregnancy-related concerns, and so just wanted to give our listeners out there the advance warning that is coming, but such an inspiring story of hope. I want you to start, though, by taking us back to that appointment that you got news that you were not expecting. And what I said, a lot of moms would see like, oh, that's my worst nightmare, which I'm always very sensitive about, because when our fear is someone else's reality. What was going through your heart and your mind when you heard that news?
Sure. Well, I'll quickly set the stage that this was a pregnancy with our 9th baby. I have 2 little ones in heaven, early miscarriages, but I had 8 healthy children, and I was in my early 40s, and I was already, just getting over the shock of having one more baby, and very excited, feeling this little one doing gymnastics in my belly, and so excited to meet him or her on the ultrasound. And so when I got the call, I really thought it was to schedule that 20-week ultrasound, but instead I heard these words like Edwards syndrome, elevated risk. I had no idea really what that meant, but we were ushered into a diagnostic ultrasound appointment. We met with a genetic counselor beforehand, and devastating is the only word I can think of. Is the news that we received was, we heard that according to many in the medical.
ジムでいい時計だねって言われる？
言われないよ。
あ、言われない。
Next,
誰
some
に
weeks
誰か見た人いい時計だね。
誰もいないよ。
any hope. The doctor who talked to us about it was very cold and clinical, and she used the term fetus instead of baby, and we just found out we were having a girl, but she referred to her as it, and it just very clinical language, and I appreciate your heart of compassion just to be able to speak truth and kindness into a very difficult situation. I think it would have made a big difference from us from the get-go, but thankfully God opened up some doors for us to get some other information and begin changing our perspective so that we were then preparing for life instead of preparing for death. So it was a rough season, that's for sure.
Beverly, I appreciate you sharing your story. And as I shared with you, just as we were starting, for me, as a pediatric nurse practitioner, I often meet families who are in this situation. And you're right, while it might seem cold and clinical on one side, which it shouldn't be, it is someone's very real reality, and all of the decisions.
タコ作っといたからちょっと辛いよ。
To orient our listeners a little bit and tell them a little bit about Edwards syndrome. It is a rare genetic condition that happens with a baby's
ないね。
フレンチフライは次だよ。 ちょっと辛いよ、タコ。久しぶりに作ったから。
And I look back on that day, I was in the car crying because I didn't know how to answer
the poor in spirit. Now, this word poor can be also those who are afflicted, who are troubled spiritually. In other words, they are not content, they are not pleased with the spiritual condition of the world. They understand that a change is necessary. So Messiah says, blessed are the poor in spirit, because theirs is the kingdom of heaven. So the very first beatitude that we study, we see that statement of the kingdom of heaven.
Learn more about the teaching ministry of Dr. Corman at loveisrael.org. You'll find videos on almost any biblical topic on his YouTube page and on the My Bible Study app. That's loveisrael.org.
We discussed my options for abortion.
After a series of health issues, this mom felt abortion was the only answer.
I was still borderline thinking abortion until the little part at the bottom was not starting moving, and we realized there were two, and I knew then.
The Ministry of Preborn is there for moms in crisis, offering free ultrasounds and the gospel in action. At just 11 weeks old, these twins cried out for life through ultrasound.
Just saying that I said, I can't. The ultrasound was really good.
Preborn clinics are the largest providers of free ultrasounds in the USA, introducing moms to their preborn babies and helping them choose life. To find out more, go to preborn.com. That's preborn.com, or dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby. That's pound 250 and say baby. Your love can save a life.
I'm Rick Scarborough, and this is my take. Israel's ability to respond to sovereignty and safety challenges is remarkable. With divine favor, Israel has defended against hostile Arab nations for 7 decades. Israel deemed Iran's nuclear ambitions inevitable and imminent, and I view the attack on Iran's nuclear program and defenses justified. Experts differ on the status of Iran's nuclear development, but all agree on Iran's desire for nuclear warheads, their support of terrorist organizations, and their intent to destroy Israel. The impact on Iran's capabilities is unknown, but two things are clear. The U.S. must continue its military presence in the eastern Mediterranean and support Israel's defenses. Second, we must use our strength and influence to de-escalate Middle East tensions. With steady, cool-headed leadership at the heated moment, the United States can reduce the possibility of a wider regional war that could spin out of control. May God provide our leaders with the wisdom to do so. I'm Rick Scarborough, and that's my take.
In our own strength, problems we cannot solve in our own wisdom, but we can get so much hope and prayer and help in prayer. That's what we need to do. And most people wouldn't expect joy to follow a devastating prenatal diagnosis. That's what we're talking about today. But Beverly Jacobson, as I have quickly learned, is no ordinary mom. Her faith, her fight, her family story will challenge everything that you think you know about disability and dignity and what it truly means to advocate for life. This is a story about fierce love and the miracles that follow. It's a story about finding hope in heartbreak. If you've been listening in, Beverly shared her daughter's prenatal diagnosis of Edwards syndrome, which is a pretty significant medical diagnosis, and she has been talking about her experience in finding life and finding hope in the heartbreak of that diagnosis when things don't go as you envision them to go. And Beverly, I know when you get a diagnosis like this, it doesn't just affect you as a mom, it affects your whole family. And so what was that like? You said you were a mom already, you had 9 children. What was that like for your husband, for your children, for your other family and loved ones walking through that with you at that time?
Yeah, so Verity is our 9th. So we have, she has 8 big brothers and sisters. And at the time they were toddlers all the way up through teenagers. And I remember that conversation we had the night that we got the confirmed diagnosis. And we never, want to sugarcoat anything. We believe in walking through life authentically with our children. We are a homeschool family desiring to pass on our faith first and foremost. That is our primary responsibility, we believe, as parents, to help them see and know Jesus. And even though I didn't quite have all the words or the answers, you know, I knew we needed to talk about it with them. And it was hard. My parents actually were visiting us that weekend, so they were hearing the news at the same time as our children. And I'm so grateful. My parents and my husband's parents instilled in us a foundation of the knowledge of God and his truth and leaning on the word, you know. And so that was where we went. We said, we don't know what this story is going to look like. We don't know how long your baby sister is going to be in mommy's belly. There's a good chance that she could go to heaven before we get to see her, or maybe shortly after she gets here. Maybe we were told that the babies with this condition lived an average of 5 to 15 days. And so that's how we started the journey, was trying to prepare our children, which, how do you do that? Like, we couldn't even wrap our brains around it as adults. And here we are talking to, you know, not even a 2-year-old. And my oldest was about 16 at the time. And I remember